This is an enemy that tries to hide, but it won't be able to hide forever.
The media, without exception, rose to the occasion, perhaps like it's never risen to the occasion before.
Some of the top stories of the last decade involved Bill Clinton, O.J., and Princess Diana. Many criticized the media for overblown coverage of these stories, but we haven't heard that type of outcry since 9/11. I'm Dr. Terry Likes, and this report examines what many journalists call the biggest story of their lives, September 11th, 2001.
All I want, America wants him brought to justice.
As the president pushes for justice, did reporters do justice covering this event and putting it in perspective for the audience? Former New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani said broadcasters should get an award for their service during and after the September 11th terrorist attacks, saying that they had not received the recognition they deserved. Giuliani said members of the media put themselves in harm's way to help inform the public, including providing life-saving information. Al Tompkins with the Poynter Institute for Media Studies agrees.
I can't remember an event that was so thoroughly covered at the instant of its development in such complexity and yet in such clarity.
Former CNN and CBS correspondent Deborah Potter now heads News Lab, whose goal involves inspiring excellence in television news. Potter says unlike some news events, finally reporters had a vital story to merit significant coverage.
So for once, I think the news media got onto the bandwagon of covering a story and wouldn't let it go, and that was actually an excellent outcome. The good news about that is that from all indications, they've kept audience. They've drawn audience and kept audience because people are interested in this.
Former MSNBC and current Las Vegas news anchor Ross Becker says after 9/11, people knew television as their window on the world.
That gave them a sense of comfort or fear, or fear first and then comfort later, because of the information that we in this profession gave them.
Like past major news events such as JFK, Vietnam, and Watergate, many view 9/11 as this generation of reporters' chance to distinguish themselves, and ABC News correspondent John Cochran praised those in the industry.
The rule was don't speculate. If you don't know, don't say. Even if you think you know, check it again. It was real old-fashioned journalism, and I think that's when we're at our absolute best.
We're going to rebuild. We're not only going to rebuild, we're going to come out of this stronger than we were before.
Just as former New York Mayor Giuliani talks about rebuilding, many believe September 11th marked the turning point for reporters and the public perception of the journalism field. NBC's Bob Dotson says with a huge life-changing story, reporters remembered the importance of content, accuracy, and not overhyping the coverage.
We could have stirred up a frenzy if we approached 9/11 like we did mostly our stories prior to that. You know, we would have had everybody attacking every minority they knew and worrying about being sick of anthrax in every point of America, when the point of the fact was it was only in certain specific places where we had to be concerned. And I think we were all pretty good about that.
Before September 11th, research indicated a declining number of viewers, readers, and listeners. Audience erosion because of a lack of trust of the media. But WFIE Evansville TV News Director Bob Freeman says people turn to the media for vital information, and journalists must work to maintain that trust.
And I, for one, think that we are, because we realized that we were losing it, or in fact maybe had even lost it, and we've now regained it, or at least I hope we have, and we're working very hard to keep it.
Las Vegas news anchor Ross Becker says we learned patriotism has an amazing effect. People around the country could do little to help those in New York City. They couldn't carry buckets of dirt, they couldn't roll bandages, but they could put a flag on their car, and that reflected a great sense of community.
I think local news, more than anything else, needs to tap into the passion of local communities. And if they do, the lessons we've all learned from 9/11 won't go away. If we go back to this is a business, we just have to fill up the time to make sure the commercials don't run together, I think we're going to lose big time.
A terrific performance by television, especially network television. That according to Al Tompkins of the Poynter Institute for Media Studies. But online coverage initially lagged behind.
It was so large, and online sites have so few resources to collect original information that they really didn't find a way, in my opinion, initially at least, but then started building giant resources for background on issues of terrorism, terror groups, and I thought the online came into its own, considering the resources that it had.
Tompkins also admits the importance of radio, not so much as a deliverer of news, but as a connector of the community.
As it turned out, radio's principal function was not to tell me that there had been an attack, because that pretty much was the province of television. But radio did a pretty interesting and pretty good job, I thought, in helping communities come together to think about having conversations about what was going on in the community and how they should react to them.
September 11th put things into perspective for a lot of people. For those in the news business, like media consultant Julie Kraft of Frank Magid and Associates, right now viewers want more hard news.
They realize that things are happening out there and they want to be kept informed. And I have found the stations that react to that are the stations that seem to be doing better. So I think when it comes to responsibility, I think that they are responsible. I don't hear any complaints about them being sensational. I think they have responded very well to what happened on 9/11.
Much of the media coverage since September 11th has centered on how could this have happened? How could we have missed all the signals? Anchor Ross Becker says part of the problem involves journalists.
We missed those signals too. We didn't cover the Middle East like we should. We didn't cover international news as we should. And if we had, maybe we could have been part of the solution instead of part of the blindfold that the rest of the world had on this thing.
The media, like everyone else, worked its way through the tragedy of September 11th. At first, horror, then sadness, then, as ABC's Sam Donaldson says, a united front against the enemy.
We as a society are working through something that we hadn't experienced before. Other nations have experienced this kind of terror attacks. We hadn't. And so I think to say, well, the media has done a good or a bad job is simply to say we, like most Americans, are working through it. And I think we all are doing it pretty well.
But now that months have passed since the tragedy, some fear complacency. CBS 60 Minutes correspondent Steve Croft says we've allocated a lot of money, but we haven't fixed anything yet.
I think people have a tendency, when they see things on television and watch critical reports, that things get fixed. They don't always get fixed. And I think it is the responsibility of journalists to make sure it prods the government to make sure that things are fixed.
So as society struggles with these issues, anchor Ross Becker says reporters face a crossroad.
Because what's going to happen is we're going to forget about it. And we, meaning society and the news people, I think we're going to go back to features on how to keep your knives sharp in the drawer and those kinds of nonsensical things that unfortunately have filled up too many local newscasts. And we're going to forget the fact that people still have a passion for what happened on 9/11.
Those at the highest levels of media management, like NBC News President Neil Shapiro, view 9/11 as the biggest story they've ever faced. And it's changed America.
I couldn't be more proud of the way we responded, not just NBC, but I think my whole profession. The people have realized this is an incredibly important story, and I think they step up with smart, substantive coverage that has not been lighthearted or foolish. It's been about the important things happening.
60 Minutes' Steve Croft gives the coverage of September 11th and its aftermath an A.
I think people have learned a tremendous amount about terrorism, about Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda, and about the difficult situation the United States finds itself politically in the world. It's done a wonderful job educating the American public.
All admit the hope that society, as well as journalists, never forget the lessons learned from September 11th.
I hope that it has established a new kind of threshold for news, an interest in international news that had essentially vanished, and a commitment to covering serious news seriously over time, as opposed to trivial news in depth ad nauseum.
I hope we don't forget that. I hope we never ever sit at a meeting, some news management meeting, and say, oh, people don't care about Scandinavia. We just don't care, because it's going to come back to bite us.
I know that there's been a lot of talk about, well, it's helped reestablish the credibility of journalism and so forth. First of all, I never believed that journalism had fallen into a state of great disrepute in any way. I thought that a lot of that was exaggerated just because of the nature of the stories we were covering.
The media is walking on ground that it's never walked before, or perhaps hasn't walked in a long, long time, at least in our lifetimes. We're going to make mistakes, but those mistakes come as a result of being in unfamiliar territory, and we're learning as we go.
I'm Dr. Terry Likes.